Hello, hi. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you might be watching us from around the world. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Jason Lin, and I'm the Client Development Manager for ProClinical in Singapore. And I'm your host for this webinar session, which covers the topic of roadblocks to growth in Asia. Welcome. So in the session today, we will be looking at the challenges faced when growing an organization across Asia Pacific. And I am pleased to welcome an inspiring panel of professionals from the healthcare industry who has been there, done that when it comes to expanding their companies across Asia. Now, first up, we've got Johnathon. He's a former HR VP APAC for Bayer, who has seen through the business through restructuring and growth phases. We've got Christine Kang, the former HR director for Ferring Southeast Asia. She has overseen the expansion of the business after the move of the regional headquarters. Last but not least, we have got Benyk, the HR manager for PolyNovo, who has established the footprint firmly in Australia, Asia, and in Europe. So together combined, they have more than 60 years of experience amongst them. Welcome, all of you, and thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you.
Now, before we start our discussion today, I would like to invite those of you who are watching live to post any of the questions you have for the panel throughout the next hour in a comment space below the screen or on the right of your screen. And we will do our best to answer some of those questions towards the end of the session if we have enough time. So without further ado and enough of me talking, to kick things off, I'd like to start a question for you, Johnathon. So being with a well-established organization, what sorts of challenges did the HR team and the businesses face when growing business further in Asia?
Great, thanks. Thanks, Jocelyn. So when we look at the challenges when it comes to well-established organization, it is twofold. One is from the business fold, one is from the talent. From the business side, as a big, well-established organization, the challenges comes especially when you are trying to get your clinical products on listing with the government. Why do I say so? Because you may have different departments, maybe you have vaccines or maybe you have medical devices or in the interventional space and pharmaceutical space going for the same listing with the government. And when the government look at your listing, they treat you as one company. So sometimes being small has its advantages as well. On the other hand, when it comes to looking at managing of resources, restructuring, we do also face some challenges because the local governments within Asia looks at multinationals very differently when it comes to looking at the standards with local organizations. On the other side of the talent, we talk about big brand name. Big brand names are good when it comes to marketing. So if you look at the names, because of the name, you are always able to attract good quality people. The challenge is this, there is shortage of talent within the Asia-Pac region. Why do I say so? It's not only in terms of the skill sets, but it's also that from a multinational perspective, we have different approaches and different standards when it comes to topics like compliance, etc. So what we ended up doing is we have to be prepared to look at investing early so that to build the culture which we want within the organization. And that means looking ahead of time, the ability to bring people slightly junior and train them accordingly so that they are part of the culture which we want to build going forward. So I think I've given a short snapshot on what challenges a big multinational or rather a well-established organization do face coming into Asia.
I see. Well, yeah, that is an interesting perspective. I guess you did cover quite a few pointers. Talk about big organization having multiple businesses, and they treat you as one organization rather than the multiple verticals that you're representing when putting your product out to the different countries. So if we were to look at the contrast now, Monica, can I pose the next question to you? If we're looking at an opposite scenario, PolyNovo, it's a smaller setup, What sort of challenges did you, as a HR face when we talk about, putting the business for growth, be it in Australia or in Asia?
Well, I think like most small companies, the biggest issue is how you scale up quickly, often like to be responsive to demand. So I think quite often we're running to meet the demands of the business. It's very much supply side problems. Like we simply don't have the people in Australia with the skill set. For example, right now I'm recruiting for senior development scientists. We're a medical device company. There simply is just a shortage of talent. The sorts of requirements that we have can't be met domestically. So we're looking in the United States. ProClinical is assisting us with that. With respect to developing our own talent, when you're wanting to really, you need someone with 10 or 15 years experience and you don't have anyone in the company to develop that up, and we don't have the luxury of time to do that, it is a bit of a mad scramble. That's the biggest problem. Simple problems with, there's just not enough supply of talent that we need.
Well, apart from talent, which I think both Johnathon and yourself face quite, unanimously, what are there any other challenges, like in terms of the branding or?
Plenty.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that we will face as a challenge. So you have all your internal relativities in the company, and then you're trying to recruit staff from the United States, where salary expectations are significantly higher. I mean, it's it's the center for biotech in the whole world, and the US dollar being significantly stronger than the Australian. You're bringing people into the country, you're trying to attract them to the country, but you've really got to explain to them how the tax system is completely different. Our healthcare system is different, our education system, and it's really about selling the benefits of our excellent tertiary system, and the fact that, like recruiting people from the United States, where they're used to, I was talking to a candidate today, he said for 4 children, he'd be looking at paying over $1 million to put his children through university. And so there are benefits for having a well-funded system and it would be similar to Singapore. I know you've got high quality tertiary education, that it's very affordable. But you've got to sell that to people, because a lot of them are just looking at the bottom line. I'm earning this and I want to earn as much or more, and trying to match those salaries can be difficult.
Yeah, I know that very well. Talk about matching of salaries. So the thing is, I think in an organization like yourself and Johnathon and soon Christine, big or small organization, there'll be some elements of things that you do, internally. You go direct sales, or you're using agency. So I guess the next question I'm going to pose to you, Christine, how do you decide what do you do on your own as an organization, and what elements will you use vendors for?
Well, so for us, I think time is pretty crucial, right? When we move into a market, especially for a small to mid-sized company. So we want to focus on driving core HR function, where we need to focus on human capital strategies and execution, which will have an impact on aligning the company bottom line. Therefore, there is a need for us to reach out to outsource vendors who are actually the center of excellence in recruitment, in HR operation, or even benefits, because they are mature, they have the perfect capabilities to deliver that efficiency to meet our needs in the countries of operation where we are moving into. So HR service vendors, to me, are offering those frequent and important deliverables, that are effective, whether it's in recruitment, in payroll, in benefits, in mobility, and even in tenancy partners for our assignees, that we reach to. To me, what is I'll probably put them into areas where I will, for them to define what that means is that when importantly, I would actually define what are my needs as an organization and who my recipient are. And the reason for me identifying them is that do they have the right expertise, and what I can leverage upon them to deliver that economy of skills, and they can fill my knowledge gap that I lack as a corporate HR practitioner that I do not have in the markets that I stepped into. Particularly so because we are moving into markets that are emerging within Asia, right? Asia is complex, to say the least, especially in terms of local regulatory requirement. And we need this specialists like in recruitment, as I mentioned, in tenancy agreement, in mobility, in benefit supports, in payroll. And they are there to support the demise that we may fall into, and this will save a lot of time and efforts on our part for us to navigate around these areas. Yeah.
Right. And I assume all this it's through the Southeast Asia region when you were covering. So it means that every single country has its own approaches. It's not, oh, we are going to use recruitment for all the countries. No, right? It's unique to every single country, I assume.
That is correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Got it. All right. And I think it's talking about using vendors, and I think the three of you did share about the talent attraction piece quite several times, I think, through the last 5-10 minutes. So, talking about that, I'm going to pose these questions to all of you. Now, from a talent attraction perspective, now, what challenges do you face when scaling a business in Asia or in Australia? What are we talking about in terms of the challenge? You talk about the lack of talent. You talk about maybe the salary portion. Maybe if you could share with us a little bit more about those two pieces, or maybe others. From the talent attraction angle. Johnathon, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I can. I think the interesting part about us, like what I've shared when it comes to established organizations, sometimes it's what we call the agility. Yeah, this is a very interesting aspect of things, because we try to be different, we try to be unique at times, like going into digital, how fast can we go, etc. And that becomes very interesting when it actually look at scaling up. Yeah. So I think scaling up for us has two main challenges. One is that if we look at internal process, definitely there are a fair bit of internal process. You need to get things differently. The other one is actually speed. Because in Asia, things goes very fast. Yeah. And we need the speed to secure a deal as much as possible, because if we hear all the people in this panel saying that there's a talent shortage, if you are slow, this person will be actually in the hands of another company. So the speed needs to be there. Yeah. And when it comes to salary, that's also a very interesting topic, because the larger you go, the more you need to be aligned. So the interesting part as HR practitioners is, regardless of the size of the organization, it's very important for us to understand the dynamics and the organization savviness to get things done fast. And some people say Bayer is a very big company. I agree. We do have a lot of processes. We do have a lot of documentation as well, alignment in terms of internal equity, etc. A lot of considerations. But if we do understand our stuff and understand the internal dynamics, there's still a way to get things done fast. So the thing which I always like to share with organizations that's coming into Asia, please understand that speed matters in Asia in getting things done. Because we do not only face competition from the large multinationals, we do also face a lot of competition from local players who can be very creative with their compensation packages. Yep. Example, LTIs, long-term incentives. A small biofarm appearing anywhere in Southeast Asia or even North Asia can easily give stock options. But then again, for well-established organizations, these are only reserved to the top few. So how do you match? How do you turn that around? So I think we are requesting, if we really need to be able to invest in Asia, it's about speed, it's about agility, and it's also about flexibility. Yeah, and as practitioners in the region, we need to also understand how do we or how do we actually give ourselves a bit of flexibility and yet need to be able to align to the overall direction of the company? Because we should not be also seen to be somewhere not belonging to the overall company. So I think there's a balance which you need to take. The ability to understand that would help any companies coming to Asia do well in terms of attracting talent.
So earlier on, I think you covered on a very interesting piece. You talk about speed, you talk about agility of a big organization, but then at the same time, we're also managing an expectation of hiring manager, I assume, and also from global, talking about the speed of you filling out the role. So how do you go about managing? I mean, if there is a talent crunch, and then we have the speed that we need to get the position filled as quickly as possible, how do you go about managing internally? I mean, if we're talking about critical positions, right? Like I think Monica was talking about a scientist role that she was looking to hire. If you're talking about that, how do you go about managing an internal process?
That's why sometimes we need partners like yourself. And to a certain extent, the question is about how realistic when we can do and implement. Let's face it this way: certain talents simply do not. So if you are trying to find a 100% profile, that will never work. So the question is, how do we actually get this data? Because the corporate will really need some data to make decisions, and we need to help them to come to a conclusion. By just sharing with them that this doesn't work, that doesn't work, doesn't help the cause. We need to be able to show what other alternatives we can to help the business grow. Because at the end of the day, as a business partner like myself, our role is to make business successful, make talent successful. So I think that is something which we need to be able to juggle with. And I put a business partner, I love this topic about business partner, is the ability for us to make business successful. However, it is just not totally a partner which listens to the business. So what I'm saying is that the ability to actually share the good, the bad, and the ugly will actually help a business realize what steps they need to do, and then over time it will be successful for them. This is especially so if you are looking at going into a totally new area or new specialization.
Got it. Understand. Okay, that's very interesting. I like whatever that Johnathon shared. What about Chris? What have you got to share? In terms of the challenges. Talent from a talent attraction point of view for a meat pharma company.
I think more so from me in terms of my own experience into Southeast Asia, in particularly, it was more about finding the right leadership, right? For companies that want to move into Asia or Southeast Asia, it's more about getting the right leadership and having the leadership having the ability or the agility to manage constant change and ability to flex their style. So why do I say that? That's because to me, Asia is a mix of different culture and value system. So be it HR, management, or leadership, the ability to lead and to manage. So one's need to have that cultural sensitivity and adaptability, right? To give that cultural diversity that exists within Asia. So many a times we have leaders coming in and say, why are people in Asia, or why is my team not talking to me? Why are they not speaking up? And then we can't work. We can't move along. So what's wrong? And many a times they expect they can't feel that silent. But the thing is that in Asia, it's just so different, right? So that leadership is so important, right? So the emerging nature of some of these markets will tend to lead itself towards uncertainty if the leadership that we plan in HR is not there. And many a times, I think we look to good recruitment partners, in the emerging market to kind of take the lead and us that advice to actually work through that kind of landscape and navigate around it. So to me, hiring the right leader for markets in Asia is critical, it's important. So I wouldn't hire just for IQ, I will hire for EQ. So vision, strategic thinkings are important drivers in leaders. I think we acknowledge that. But I will look out for personality. I'll look out for style. They are critical aspect in driving business towards success in Asia as well. Because this translates to the ability in the long run to retain the next level of talent and sustainability in the long term, as well as creating a very healthy atmosphere, as well as pipeline and culture within the organization. And that is a long-term ROI. That is intangible. So that is people practice in my terminology, in my context.
Oh, okay.
We worked together previously, and we talk a lot around that.
Yeah, I know. We were interviewing people not just based on what you see on their CV. I guess they check up a lot of things on the CVs, but then down to personality. Yeah, you did highlight the point, and I remember like it was only yesterday. So yes. so Monica, I see you nodding your head away. When Johnathon is talking about the challenges, and then likewise for Christine, we were talking about IQ and EQ. No. Well, what about you? Trying to build PolyNovo. Let's talk about the earlier days when it's still a smaller setup to where it is today. How do you talk about the scaling part, the challenges that you face?
I mean, I think 3 years ago we were about 11 people or 12 people. We're 93. 12 months ago we were 39. Today we're 93. So we are a really tiny company. But so I cover UK, EU, US, Singapore, and Australia. So we have staff in all of those places. Oh, and Ireland. So the reason I was nodding my head is because I think you can have, you have the concept of like, what's your organizational culture, but you also have to meet the culture of the staff where they live. You can't ignore that. Like, you can't just impose your culture and expect people to all be singing from the same song sheet unless you do a lot of work on it. So I think you have to meet the labor market where it is. I think that, if somebody says, we want to be paying people roughly the same around the world, that doesn't work. I mean, you have to meet whatever the local labor market is, or you won't get the best staff. So my perspective is always get the best staff you can, and you have to pay what's required to get them. But yeah, it had a lot of resonance. Both people previously, I've seen people. I'm from Canada. I'm Canadian. And I can remember managers coming from other countries and expecting they would behave like they were in Germany or they were in Holland. And, the culture is very different, and people don't respond well when someone's not sensitive to the way things are done around where they live. And that's just reality. So
I see. What about, well, back then, the initial struggles, apart from, you probably have your an amount of money that you put for recruitment and everything else that's in place. Now, benefits, were there all in place, or were you like putting in bits and pieces through, the journey of you being with the organization?
Benefits is actually something I'm really passionate about. Remuneration and benefits is something I really think is so important. And sometimes the cost of those benefits are relatively small, but it's the message that it sends to the staff. People are always interested in controlling cost, and you have to be sensitive to how much these things cost. But I don't think we should underestimate how important to morale. People like to feel valued. They like to feel they're doing as well or better than other people in their discipline, their profession, or whatever. So there's always a tension. There's a tension between, the bottom line and motivation. But I think sometimes it's a false economy, trying to economize on benefits. That's just my personal experience, and some people will feel differently. But yeah,
it's okay. We all learn from personal experience anyway, so that's valuable. So it's good. I see Johnathon smiling across. So that's good. I think he acknowledged that. So the thing is, moving from talent, and we talk about talent helping to grow, right? The growth strategy of an organization. Building on talent is one part. So if we talk about that, Chris, my question to you is, HR typically, or HQ, global HQ typically has a say when it comes to growth strategy. now. So how do you balance like expectation of the HQ who wants to move quite quickly to achieve their goals?
That's a pretty good question, Jack. And an interesting one, right? Because many a times you like to have their own projects and stuff like that, and then they would cascade it down to the region and then expect us to complete it within a certain time frame, right? And I think that is where we face the challenge, because locally we may not be able to adapt it on time, or we do a lot of customization, tailoring, especially within Asia. Asia, again, I will emphasize that it's a mixed bag, because 10, 18 countries, emerging markets in particular, so different regulation, different laws, different government, whatever you call it. So a lot of time, how to do it, when's the right time to do it, when's the right time to grow. I think we need to approach this from a standpoint of, globally integrated, locally customized. That would be the mindset that I would typically adopt across my career so far. Combining a centralized approach coupled with subject matter expert in the right field. Some of the starting points, if I were to bucket it, would be first, leverage on global technology platform from the HQ, implement a global platform that allows the system to cross-speak and offer easy to use self-service capability to both managers and employee. Secondly, rationalize some of the core global values to establish that alignment, common alignment, we call it. And then it's more for an ease of administration operation. And that could be in rewards, in incentive, in milestone, or even business objective or roadmaps, right? I think then it will go down to the third or fourth piece of implementation. This is where local adaptation or customization is required within that global process. And then the local teams could then start looking at, tapping on infrastructure, standardization to optimize local talent, and then bring the local program into each business or geography to drive at local level implementation. And then finally, this is where you recreate that local subject matter expert to start bridging it back to global. So I think in a summary, to me, is the ability to flex the global consistency and standard, and then having the efficiency to scale at local level and regional level to allow for growth. And then employee engagement and acceptance is equally important to wrap up. So that if those can be done, and I have done it personally myself, that will be the right time and to go and to time it effectively. I wonder if I make sense to you.
Yeah, for sure. I see Jonathan and Monica nodding away. So, well, yes, it makes sense for sure. What about Jonathan? What would you say to the same question? I mean, I'm just wondering if you have got something else to add on. Chris have to say.
I think what Chris says pretty much is where most of the challenges are, right? In terms of understanding the fact that Asia Pac is actually not one Asia Pac.
Exactly.
So the interesting part is that we also have a challenge in terms of what we call historical background, which sometimes is not well understood in other parts of the world. So because even in Europe, they have been through a long period of history and they can laugh at each other and things will still work out. But in Asia, we still have countries whereby there are what we call sensitivity in terms of deploying people. So that needs to be well understood as well. So the sensitivities is very important, simply because I used to run small session, or rather business partner sessions, for people to say, how can they be atypical Asians? Interesting. Why everybody, and that is a very interesting question, which I try to address, and we did so because most of us in Asia are not trained in the manner to speak what we think. Yeah, because we were a bit more reserved by the way of education, and the way our hierarchy works in Asia. However, when you decided to operate in a global environment, the ability to actually stand out and say and put your points across becomes very important. And at a few stages of my career in Asia Pac, I put it upon myself. How do we help talents be less Asian and be more global? And that is
I'm curious.
There are in terms of reframing. So a lot of times what I did is I do a lot of reframing for them, and also to improve what their self-confidence is. And interestingly, for the last many years, more than a decade ago, I was termed by my global colleagues as, "Are you sure you came from Asia? You are atypical Asian." That was the name which was actually put on me, but it's fine. I think we need more of those because we need people to really understand that Asia is different. I give a very interesting example of an engineer expect. This is amazing. Yeah, because I used to have to deal with German engineers. And true to their love for passion of engineering, they like to build facilities which are built for life. The challenge with Asia and Asian governments, yeah, we like to say within these 10 years, I may reclassify this zone, and then it no longer becomes manufacturing. So we need to shift our facilities. We need to make a lot of changes. And because of that, we don't have a concept of doing heavy investment, to build a facility for life. And you see, the interesting part is the dynamics are very, very different. And that also comes to selection of people. I don't select people for life. And it's also recognizable that in Asia, people just change job more often. So, yeah, and I think that is some recognition that the way we operate and the way we recognize talent is different. So I have challenges at times when I provide a CV. The person is good. The behavior is good, and he can churn out the output in 2-3 years. And then, but from a career perspective, he changed every 3 years. Yeah, and when he surfaces to corporate, the first thing is, "Are you sure you can keep him?" And then my answer is, "Actually, I don't need to keep him for life. I just need to keep him for the period whereby I can grow the business, and where it's at different stage, maybe I have a different person for you." So that's what I add on to what Christine says. I can see the same nodding across. So I think this topic is also quite relevant in that sense.
Will you be agreeable to that, Monica? It's like, I'm not too sure. Well,
I think we probably face a very different set of challenges because of the example that I would give is because we're a medical device company, we have people that stay sometimes because they don't see valid options. And so that whole concept of presenteeism, where people are at work, but they're not fully engaged, they're wanting to be somewhere else, but they feel they don't have the option to pursue that. I think that's a big issue. Trying to offer people career opportunities and to try to engage them, which is difficult when you're a small company. It's not like you have 6 or 8 jobs and it's easy to rotate people. You may only have 1 or 2 people in a discipline. Yeah, it's awkward. It's definitely challenging. I've worked in very big companies previously. I worked in Ministry of Education with 50,000 teachers and 4,000 public servants. And, it's a very different challenge being in a small company where everyone's highly specialized and there are only a few people in each discipline. It's tough. It's really tough, actually. It's a big challenge.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a bit tricky. Well, I think still within PolyNovo, regardless of how big or small it is, you still have quite a diverse group of people that you hired through the organization, right? So if we're on that topic, I would like to ask you maybe you can talk a bit about the challenges that you encounter while you're trying to build a consistent company culture throughout the region that has such diversity, in terms of languages, cultures. How to continue to promote a positive company culture from an internal and external perspective.
Is that directed at me? Yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, to a certain extent, our approach has been that for some entry countries where we're just getting into them, we don't attempt to employ. We use distributors until we can get a hold in that country. We get a feel for the culture. We get an idea of what sort of talent's out there, how much people earn, where they work, and then we'll swap to direct employment after that. So Singapore is one where we went in, we employed directly, and the expectation was this person would also cover Malaysia. And then, of course, discovered, or what is becoming evident is that Malaysians prefer to deal with Malaysians. They don't always want to deal with someone from Singapore, maybe from a different cultural background. Yeah, there are a lot of challenges. Look, there's so many pitfalls for the young Prairie punter. And the point, like Vietnam is very different to Korea, is different to, Japan is different to Singapore. So I don't really, Asia, I think is just so diverse. I would never try to think of them as like one mass. I think every country has very much its own challenges and a unique culture you've got to deal with.
Right. Agree. I totally agree. I think, what do you think about it, Chris? You spent some time in Thailand when you were hiring for the business back then, which went through some changes, and then subsequently for Indonesia. So those are the two emerging markets. Maybe you could share with us a little bit more about that building that culture in those two parts of the world. Same thing, how you promote something that's positive in terms of positive company's culture internally and of course externally.
So I will take it broader because I'm a strong advocate of diversity and inclusion, which is a larger part of culture as well. So if I may take that, so like I would like to share, right, in my current role, I even lead up the regional diversity team. I set up multiple diversity and inclusion across the entire space of ASEAN, right? So to me, diversity isn't just about checking the box. It's about, like in Thailand, where you just mentioned, and even in Indonesia previously in my pharma work, it's about recruiting a workforce that includes individuals with different worldviews, ethnicity, religion, background, abilities, age, perspective, and opinion. Basically, whatever you named it, you have it, right? So hiring diverse individuals means little when they don't feel included, and this is a challenge that I face, and many other companies that when you speak to, when they say they want to create a well-rounded culture, do they actually do it? Do they run it? So an example that I have when I recall back my farmer days, right? Like in Indonesia, I recall my Indonesia GM. She was telling me very specifically, we had this discussion and she said, Christine, I'll be very particular. Let's not hire an all-ladies team in Indonesia. And with all due respect, can we have some men in the team, and we make sure that not everyone wear the scarf, right?
Okay, too long. Okay.
It's diversity and inclusion, right? So leaders and management needs to walk the talk, and she reflects it by walking the talk with me, right? And if she had not said that, I would have told you that would have been so super different, right? So the need to be on board about diversity and inclusion and being constantly aware of their own unconscious biasness show through in the example that I just shared. And our role, to me, remains in the background to constantly engage C-suite leaders like her to be sponsored of such, activities and programs, and have them even able to be the sponsor of such programs, right? So we know that for us, we don't need to be at the forefront. We can be at the back, and they will be the leaders to be at the forefront.
Right.
And another piece to it for me is that it's important to create. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, it's important to create a culture of safe and supporting enclave for employees to speak out without any fear of retaliation or judgment, so that when they have topics which are sensitive, difficult, they'll have no fear of saying it and then creating a divide in the workplace. nor do they have a fear of pretending to be different. So in my organization, for example, I create what I call different group of employee resource group, ERGs for short, and they are run by employees themselves, and they associate themselves to the different group that they feel very closely to, and they volunteer themselves into the groups. So they're very free to connect, communicate, and share freely among themselves. And basically, they also allow themselves to celebrate their differences, their commonalities, and at times they come together to hold activities, to generate conversation, to show appreciation for one another. And I think such accountability kind of takes different diversity and inclusion accountability away from just HR, because over time it builds the DNA into the company culture itself, right? So it becomes a company culture, and this promotes itself over time. Yeah. So that would be my take and my practice.
I see. Okay. Well, that's interesting. I like how your Indonesian country head is very determined in mixing up the gender within the country, and from the sound of it sounds like it's a very positive change from there. I've known that the business has gotten to not just doubling roles over the last few years. I know it has gone from where it was to be very, very positive today, and it's still in a high growth country. So yeah, kudos to her. As she has a very good approach, far-sighted leader. What about Jonathan? What about your views? I'd like to hear what you have to share about diversity.
Actually, I'm also a fan of diversity.
Yeah?
I'm also a fan of diversity. At the end of the day, for me, it is about getting the right person in without all this biasness. And it really helps because we really need to get people from different views, and that's how we are successful. I remember the time in pharma whereby we did a leadership feedback or 360, and we recognized the fact that we are all a certain type. And that doesn't help in terms of thinking. And because of that reflection, we started to think that we need to add even more diversity within the group. So I'm also a big fan of diversity because it brings in a lot of value. The only thing about diversity and inclusion is to go beyond the concept of gender. Because I just have to be a bit careful about that because, in different parts of Asia, it's also measured differently as well. And let's see if any of you run Japan business. We also know that there is this diversity in terms of disability ratio and things like that. So it is very important to bring in the different views. The only thing I would like to share is my fear in terms of bringing people in with diversity and different views. It's not about bringing them in. It's about the ability to sustain them over a period of time. Yeah, because we always say, let's say, I came from a company called Global. We call it globalized. So basically, we would like to bring people with diverse views in. After a few years, you realize one thing: they become part of you and will no longer raise their opinions and views. And I think we have a big debate within Bayer at one stage about Bayerized. But I have to give kudos to Bayer. If you look at what happens to their board, they have actually put a new face on the board in Bayer. So it's amazing. I think we all celebrate diversity and inclusion. Yeah. So I just want to repeat on that because a lot of times we try to bring people with different views into a company. We do not sustain them over a period of time. And that is the danger. If can, we should continue to encourage them because that's what makes companies successful.
Have you actually encountered or have you experienced any one of your countries that you try to build this consistency, but it keeps failing? I mean, you have managed the entire Asia Pacific. There's so many countries in it. Is there any one or two countries that you can share where it's a constant drive that you're drilling into the team that it has to be this consistency, but it keeps failing on you? Have you ever experienced? Have you ever actually experienced this before?
I would say it does. I think, however, the challenge, I won't want to pinpoint countries, but at the end, it came back to myself. The question is, do we really understand what makes the country tick? Yeah. In certain cultures or countries, they say to you everything is okay. Yeah, but behind the scenes, things don't work. But in certain countries, everything is a no. Without diving into details, somehow or another, they will arrive at the results for you. So the question is the art of really understanding them and be sensitive and make that work. Even it's interesting when you talk about that. I recall the time when we looked at, even as in China, one of my favorite topic in China is that every province is actually treated as a country because they work so differently from each other. So I won't want to really pinpoint, yeah, I do face that, but half of the time I realize is that we do not really take pains to really understand what makes them tick. Once you understand that lever, things will change.
Got it. Okay, I like that. It's not an easy question that I throw at you, Jonathan. So thank you for picking it up. So I think we're more or less done with the questions. For the day. I'm just trying to see if we have any comments. Anyone has any questions? We have a very quiet audience. Nothing came through, or maybe all of you have hit the nail. In terms of the pain points that they're struggling with. Let's see, should we wait a little and see if there's anyone who has got any comments? So for those viewers, if you're still watching this or you're just hearing it on the background, you can leave a comment on the right side of your screen or the bottom of your screen, I think. Don't be shy if you have questions. I've got a panel of experts here. No, okay. I think the three of you have covered, I think, most of, if not all, the points. So I guess with that, I really want to thank the three of you for taking time to discuss your experience and insights today. I think it's been a really worthwhile session, which I hope will provide some good advice to some of you who has joined us this evening from my end, morning for some, which you can put into your practice, with your own growth plans at the moment. So thank you also to everyone who took the time to watch the session today. So please do look out for more webinars happening over the next few weeks. So have a great evening and goodbye.
Bye.